told you I already hit record.
Then I would say hello, everybody, and welcome to the thing that we do where we talk about things.
What are we talking about? Where am I? Oh, Final
Crisis
Fantasy
Core.
Crisis Core. Yeah. Do you want me to open this up? Because this is obviously my first time playing it.
Yeah, you go for it, man. Gush for a second.
Gush for a second? Okay. Final Fantasy Crisis Core was released in 2007 on the PlayStation Portable and plays like it was on a PS3. It's
It's that good.
so good. There are qualms with it, like the mechanics are very repetitive, but there is constantly a sense of purpose in what you're doing. There is growth. There is constant seeing improvement in your character, Zack, as he goes from a second class to a first class to then being an outcast by the Shinra organization. And my God, do you feel that transformation as you play, especially if you play right? Wow.
You can feel his strength getting. That's the best thing about video game heroes written and created well, is you should always feel yourself getting stronger from your accomplishments.
Oh my God, do you? And like okay, yeah, you get a lot of repetitive items, but this game doesn't like say that you can't put on four of the same items or whatever. And that was so cool because I would just break my magic build super early and stuff like that, and I really enjoyed doing that. And it was a good like deviation from playing something like Elden Ring, which obviously we're talking about 2022 and 2020 or 2007, but like just having that action RPG that is like all action all the time.
Fast paced, it's flashy, there's a lot of bright visuals, big things going on, big weapons, swords, all kinds of really fast paced movement.
It's so fun. It's so fun. And this is the first portable game we've covered, correct?
Yep.
I can't give it a more glowing review. 9 out of 10. Like, go play this game. If you don't have a PSP, play PPSSPP. If you don't have a computer, play it on your phone. Like, PPSSPP is completely Android based. You can get the ROM. It's in free download directories that are legal. It's so good. It's so good. Where do we begin? Do you want to take a note here and lead the conversation?
Crisis Core is an interesting part of. I think I got this right. It's an interesting part of what was an anniversary set for Final Fantasy VII, and it's something that like it takes ideas from the community that played and loved Final Fantasy VII, takes the big portion of the story that was missing, and it does everything that was asked of them with such a small team. It's very impressive. That is the bottom line. There's any descriptive word for this game, it's impressive.
Let's start at the beginning, shall we?
D.
Zack is like this just out of recruit Soldier 3 into Soldier 2 under the guidance of Angeal, right? And if I'm not mistaken, is Zack the first soldier to go through the Genova process?
No, I think Genesis and Sephiroth did too.
There's only one issue with that statement because you're technically correct, but Genesis and Angeal were both created by implanting Genova cells into the womb of women who bore
So
them.
they existed already with.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
And Sephiroth is the combination of all of the failed experiments by Hojo.
The
So
one-winged angel.
they're not technically soldier because they're just creations, right?
Well, then I guess you'd be right. But like, does isn't that you made the argument a minute ago? Isn't that kind of like what Soldier does? That like they're all kind of creations in and of them, so they have to go through all of these arduous things in order to be totally modified to fit this soldier regimen.
But we're never explicitly told that Zack was a part of a project until the end where he gets the S cells, which tells me he never was given Genova cells. He only went through the Mako reaction.
Interesting. So I didn't catch that.
And that would be the same thing with Cloud. Cloud goes through the S cells as well. So they're both the same. But then when Genesis gets picked up at the very end, it's two soldiers getting out of a Turk helicopter, which leads me to believe those guys were recent finished experiments. And then Genesis survived, so I'm guessing they collected him to get the cells from Genesis, but obviously this is stomping on Dirge Cerberus's territory and other Final Fantasy games that explain this further. But I just thought that was interesting because it's kind of a cliffhanger in the lore that I don't have an answer for with my limited knowledge.
You
But
know, that draws me back a little bit. You were saying, you asked earlier before we started the podcast why Cloud was always fighting the Turks. That was something that it made you consider when you stopped to think about it. And with what you just said, I kind of stopped and I really thought for a second. And it kind of makes sense that Cloud would continue to fight the Turks after Zack dies because whether or not he's a deserter, he was Soldier. And they recognize that, right? He looks like Soldier. He was Soldier. He fights like Soldier.
yeah, he has the Mako eyes too.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
So they're just automatically like, oh, this is the enemy.
I didn't know the significance of the Buster Sword. Like I see it all the time. People always talk about it, blah blah blah. It's like a Final Fantasy staple at this point.
That's Zack's weapon. It's
It was
his
Angeal's
passed the
weapon,
torch. Yeah. Angeal gave it to Zack. Zack gave it to Cloud. They passed the torch down so hard.
which is crazy. Like, and that's another part where this is spoiler territory, everybody. So if you're watching this, it's assuming you've either seen a playthrough or played the game. Um, it's one of the things that made the ending so emotionally impactful, where Zack literally throws down his life to protect Cloud. Zack pretty much knew after he broke out of the containment cell that was putting the S cells in him that he was gonna die.
And that was just it. There was no other to it. It was unavoidable.
Yeah. And his only goal was to save Cloud's life, knowing that Cloud had the S cells and he was super powerful. And making sure that Cloud got the sword or something was like. And then when Cloud says good night, not goodbye, not so long, good night. Like, icing on the cake. So good.
Hitting him really hard in the heart feels.
Right. Because goodbye would imply like Zach's gone. Like you're never gonna hear about him again. But he says good night, as if there's something so much more important at play, like the live stream, where Cloud is going to have interactions with it and come in contact with Zach again, which we saw in Final Fantasy VII, and that
Which,
just so good.
given everything we know about the live stream, it's kind of how things work. He's literally just sleeping as a soul in
Right.
the stream of life, waiting for reincarnation to happen as it does.
So good. And it also brings into the question of like when Angeal died and Lazar died, they both re-entered the live stream, right?
Mhm.
We saw that physically take place, and so did other copies. Like when his hair is consumed on the bridge, and you fight that boss, that monster becomes a part of the live stream, which implies that these copies are somehow gaining access to souls and becoming a part of the
Which,
stream.
uh, Shinra kind of is like manipulating the live stream, right? They're harvesting it, and it's a problem. That's the whole point of the desertion. That's they know what they're doing is wrong finally, right? They know that they are ultimately working for the bad guy. And I think when Zack figures out that the fate of of existence itself kind of rests on that knowledge living on, it kind of has the choice taken away. He doesn't really, aside from just it being a selfless act to save Cloud, there's also that like Cloud is the only thing now that can save the world because I'm going to die no matter what.
Yeah, and Final Fantasy Crisis Core kind of gives a way better credence because they don't refer to Mako as just Mako. It's the planet's life stream.
Yeah.
It's where new souls are formed and created by the ancients for new beings to exist. So that way, not everybody who's reincarnated is the same soul living again. There are new souls literally being born from the earth, and by
which is
harvesting the
why,
Mako, the earth
which is what
cannot.
makes, which is what makes the Genesis cells so important.
Right.
Now, they are born directly from the life stream. It is, they're harvested almost.
Which is wild. Like that whole entire like bioengineering off of planet lifestream consciousness concept is so cool. And I never
And
thought about it like that.
it's a way better story than they told in 7. They don't talk about any of that well. None of it is conveyed
I
properly.
agree. And by the way, we should probably state we are not talking about Intergrade or the remake. We are talking about the PlayStation 1
Yeah.
Final Fantasy 7.
PS1 Final Fantasy 7, not the best written when it comes to its backstory.
No, 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 no. So just note, like, we're going to avoid talking about Intergrade and the remake because I already played it. I know it's a completely different story. Red
I
has
have
not.
not. I've yet to play it. I heard good things. I want to experience it.
So we have plans on playing that in the future and then doing another episode on this later.
Yeet.
Um, but I love Zach. His personality is so fun. He's so young and full of life, and you constantly see him struggling with his decisions. And it's well written and it's well portrayed with him having friends inside of Shinra and him having such a connection with Angio, who is his master, his leader, his everything. And you see the betrayal, and you really feel for Zach and what he's going through constantly.
There's this sense of humanity to who was once this like faceless most important character.
Right.
This divergent story happens with Cloud because of Zack in the first place, right? And in the original Final Fantasy VII, it's a real knock to the groin when you find out that Cloud is pretty much not significant at all to what has happened thus far. You're
And
hit with it right at the end of the game when you feel like you've been through so much and you've experienced this life story from this character you just didn't.
it's not the state that like Cloud's purpose is unimportant, and it's not the state that Cloud's ambitions are wrong or anything like that.
It's
It's
just
just
that the story they told at the time wasn't the right story.
as I was gonna say, it's like if they really wanted to do Final Fantasy VII, they just needed one more disc. They needed to tell Zack's story. They needed to
Yeah.
give us a reason to understand why Cloud was the way he was. And there's
Otherwise, it just ended up a jumbled mess like it did.
and there's all kinds of other issues like um Cloud coming in contact with the life stream and then becoming Zack or partially being Zack. That was a whole thing that I had a hard time understanding. And then Cloud meets Aerith. Cloud is literally told by Zack, "Tell Aerith I said hello and I'm sorry." Like at the end of Final Fantasy Crisis Core, he never did that, and it just makes me look at Cloud like, "Are you just an asshole?" And
Yeah, he's just kind of like this rebellious kid that Zack had a really warm spot for.
they don't even give Cloud that much screen time, and I'm grateful. I'm really grateful because I like talking to like Kunsel and Luxray because they're these side characters who are just soldier threes. They just work for Shinra, but they're close with Zack, and you work with them, and you go on missions with them, and they send you mail and they talk to you, and it tells me that Zack is a part of this world. He has friends. He has a reason to go back. Leaving Shinra is not as simple as just I'm gonna leave Shinra. Knowing that like his family all work for Shinra in Gongon. I'm gonna say Gongon because of Super Monkey Ball. But they all work there
Whereas,
and
like, Cloud's story in comparison was just desertion. Rebellious teenager equals powerful soldier equals deserter of fortune. And
well, that's not completely
ultimately,
true.
yeah,
Now we
he
know
played.
more.
Yeah, we know more. He was playing mercenary of fortune for a greater purpose, and that's all fine and dandy. it could have been conveyed so much better, and they did a really good job of that here.
And that's where integrate comes in, and the integrate storytelling is so much better. I don't want to spoil things, but this is something minute. When you play as Cloud and you're experiencing the thing Cloud goes through, you can understand how Zack influenced him so much better right out of the gate with Intergrade. You can just feel his purpose and ambition being there right out
It's
of the
also
gate.
not all displayed through poorly translated text anymore, though.
True. But like when you run into Tifa and Cloud has his interactions with Tifa and he has that super awkward moment with Tifa, you can understand because now seeing it in Crisis Core, Tifa and him have issues. They've always had issues with each other. And now we can
Yeah.
understand that and we can put it into perspective. And when I go into integrate, I'm going to have new knowledge to really understand the fleshed out story that's being told.
It's going to be a better experience overall. I don't feel like we should play Dirge of Cerberus, but because that doesn't contribute to anything. But I do feel like we do need to watch Advent Children before we hop into Integrate, because Advent Children is a huge part of like, I guess it's technically the ending, all things considered, but you need to know the ending to understand the beginning, and Integrate is that weird middle part somewhere. So your knowledge about Crisis Core will get better if you watch Advent Children, which ultimately will make the Final Fantasy VII Integrate experience just the perfectly well-rounded experience that you're going to want it to be.
I well, we should also state that integrate is the PC release. So if you're confused, PC release is the remake on console. We got integrate, you guys got the remake. Just to be clear. Um, I'm completely down for watching Advent Children. I'm also interested in Dirge of Cerberus because now I know when Vincent comes out of the coffin, I understand his character a little bit better from Crisis Core. So I do want to know why Vincent takes action the way he does before he runs into Cloud. I want to know what happened there.
And it's an interesting story. He's an interesting character. It's worth a good side romp through. It's good as its own story.
Even if we come back to it like way down the road, because we're finding out that there's a lot more Final Fantasy VII stuff than we thought.
Yeah,
They're like, and okay, let's get to the issues. Okay, let me move into the issues, shall we? Um,
go for it.
why is this called Final Fantasy? This
Yeah, you could have just called it Crisis Core and it would have been great.
none of this needs to be Final Fantasy. These could all be their own games. Every single Final Fantasy game could just be its own game. And if
I've
it's a
made that argument
franchise,
years.
and I used to disagree with you in previous commentary, I did disagree with you, but I get it now.
Yeah,
And I have a feeling that when we play Crystal Chronicles, it's going to be the same thing. They
it's a
should,
totally different story, totally shifted the tone. There is no relation to anything else you've ever seen in Final Fantasy.
and I'm sure there's going to be some hyper Final Fantasy guy out there that's like, this is why they're all called Final Fantasy. But at the end of the day, I just feel like you could have just called it literally anything else and created a franchise, and it would have been so much better.
Yeah,
And I know that sounds really petty and mundane, but names do matter. If I say
they
Final
do.
Fantasy VII, it's Final Fantasy VII. It's the
If I
seventh.
say,
Like, ugh.
if I say Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War, why the fuck couldn't it have just been Cold War? I
Yeah.
hate to say that, but like that's a fact.
Cold War, a Call of Duty
It's
story
got
in
it's got
space.
it's got two fucking subtitles. Black
Right.
Ops subtitle Cold War. Like why? The name is just wrong. And Rocky, the Rocky movie series. You got Rocky 1 through 4, then you got Rocky Balboa, Rambo. You got First Blood and then Rambo First Blood Part 2 and then Rambo 3 and then the fourth one is just called Rambo.
Makes no
The name
sense.
makes such a huge difference.
I don't know.
That's why
I know it's petty. I know it is. But I feel like this whole game franchise could have just been called Mako or Mako. And it would have been an incredible story arc about the planet's energy, and I would have had a bigger connection to the importance of that kind of event. But
But if they did that
eh,
back when it came out on the NES, the original Final Fantasy, it would have just been literally any other failed JRPG at the time.
well, they could have called that one Final Fantasy. I just feel like this one in particular does not need to be called Final Fantasy.
No. Yeah, Final Fantasy VII should have never been a part of that series. It should have been its own RPG.
I agree.
Like, you can make references to your other series and still have an entirely new game with its own universe going on. I mean, they do that already, just with the same name. Why does it have to be Final Fantasy?
Or just
It
look at
doesn't.
this incredible franchise known as Control. They have all these completely different IPs that are interwoven. Uh, they're not all called Control 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Like they're all their own thing. There's
When
no
you get down to the meat of it,
mm,
Kingdom Hearts is a Final Fantasy game, and they didn't call those Final Fantasy.
yeah, pretty much. It's so bizarre to me that this is where they are. And these are older games, and I understand that, but they're still producing Final Fantasy games. Like 15 came out. That did not
Final
need to be
Fantasy
Final Fantasy 15.
Final Fantasy Origins is its own weird thing, and that doesn't need to be Final Fantasy. Well, I don't even know what Final Fantasy 14 is. There's so much of it there. It, it's huge.
And it's so bizarre to me because I don't consider myself a big Final Fantasy fanboy. But the thing is if you walked into my basement and looked at my game collection, you would see multiple copies of Final Fantasy games, some of them sealed, some of them in steel editions. But like, I don't take anything away from a lot of those games, but Final Fantasy Crisis Core, Final Fantasy 7, Integrate, not the original, I take a lot away from. I
They're
enjoy
good.
those games a lot.
Because it's not just being a good franchise, it's being a good game with a good story and a reason to stick around and play more.
Right.
It's capturing the player emotionally and capturing the player with fun, capturing the player with adrenaline, capturing the player's attention on specific small details that catch their interest. It's a combination of all of these things that create this awesome story that could totally go overlooked if you've only ever played Final Fantasy VII and never thought about playing anything else around it.
And in many
Like,
cases, I would argue don't. Play Final Fantasy VII Integrate, play Final Fantasy Crisis Core. If you enjoy both, play Dirge of Service, watch the movie.
and I think we can all agree nobody ever needs to play the original Final Fantasy VII again.
I think if you're hardcore, give it a shot, but play literally anything else.
Yeah, something else. Final Fantasy VIII, like that got a good upscale. It
Ooh.
looks pretty good. It's a good game. I like it. It's again its own story, but it didn't get nearly as much love as 7 did.
8 and 6 are incredible.
6 is a weird one for me because as much as I love it, I'm also like, this is just not a great game from the Super Nintendo lineup.
Oh, I'm talking about the PS1 version.
Of 6?
Yeah.
I think you mean 9. The PS1 was 7, 8, and 9.
Let me see.
6 was released as 3 here in America and was called Final Fan or where was SNES.
Nope.
And
Final Fantasy 6, PS1. Yep.
what?
Yep. That's the one that I had. I had a European import copy. I was a part of the Final Fantasy anthology.
Oh. Oh, that had the games from Japan that
Yes.
didn't see release. Okay.
Yeah.
The
That's
first time it saw its way to an English market with Final Fantasy VI being the actual name.
yes. And then I also had it on my PS3 as a PS1 classic downloadable.
I always had it the ROM on hacked Wii's. Like I was a big fan of emulating games on the Wii.
IX is 9, right?
Yeah,
See, I've never played 9 because
it's
I have a sealed copy and I never opened it.
I guess like 9 is a lot closer to the original Final Fantasy than any of the other 3D games have been, right? But it's just a whole lot of nothing. It looks really good. It's one of the best looking games on the PlayStation 1 hands down. and it's fun. But it's just like once you've played through 7 and 8, you get to 9 and you're like, so nothing is happening, right? And you get bored. It is the definition of repetition.
This is like the core of my issue with the Final Fantasy story arc or games is like some of them take place so far in the past and then some of them take place so far in the future. Some of them take place on completely different planets apparently. And I have so many issues with that. It's like this goes back to the naming algorithm thing that they have going on. It's just annoying. You're just annoying your fan base.
Yeah. At the end of it, you're really annoying your fan base. You're hurting your marketing, continuing to call it Final Fantasy.
And there's no problem with like using the same monster designs and things like that. Like I get it. You have monsters that are repetitious throughout a lot of the games. That's completely fine. If it's not a Final Fantasy game, just don't call it a Final Fantasy game. That easy. All I gotta say. My chair's farted. I don't know if the mic picked it up. My chair squeaked. But Final Fantasy Crisis Core. Let's try to get back on topic. I don't know why Genesis lives. That was really annoying to me. The whole game led up to that fight, and then he survives in the end. Um, the Lazard becoming Angeal copy thing was fine, but my God, that needed to be portrayed way sooner. Because when Lazard left the office and they were like, "Oh, he was a co-conspirator in all of this," I was like, "Okay, that's fine. I get it. All right." And then he shows up as Angeal, and I'm just like, "No, just no."
Just no.
And then he's like, "Oh, well, I still have Angeal's memories and I have my honor." And it's like, what do you mean?
So
What do you mean? How do you And I understand that that's setting up how Cloud gets Zack's memories and stuff like that. I get that that's what they're setting up. But it was just
it just shoveled. Like they really kind of shoveled it in there without giving you much time to process it or without giving it any real pretext or anything to set up that situation. They used that situation to set up the memory transfer, but they didn't do anything to set up why that was happening in the first place.
and I should state that we're using memory transfer and things like that. And I'm sure larger fans are going to be like, "Oh, this is how it works." And but if it's not properly portrayed to the player and we're just casual players, we're not going to be able to walk away with that information to justly understand the story. And that's our core issue is we can't justly understand some of the story aspects because it's not portrayed well. I
And it
mean,
could have been.
oh,
That's
absolutely.
just it, right? They could have taken a very little bit of time to, but that's not a bad thing against there. It was a very, very small team, right?
Yes.
It's one of those things that like it's a gripe. You notice it, and it really does kind of hit bug you for a second. But ultimately, it's such a small part of what is this ultimately much more meaningful thing.
Hmm. Yeah. Which is the one with the gun sword? The main character has a gun sword.
That's 8.
That's 8. Okay, so yeah, that's the one that I really
Squall,
liked. Squall. Yep. I do want to play that one. I have the
Squall.
remaster.
I have no idea why Squall became Leon in Kingdom Hearts, but like
Oh, you can definitely see how things like Final Fantasy 7 and 8 inspired some of the Devil May Cry styles. I mean, Devil May Cry, I mean, Dante is literally just Leon in a different skin, admitted by the actual designer. That's literally what he did. Um, but like some of that like really edginess that's going on in Final Fantasy 7, Crisis Core and 7, it does actually translate over to other games. Like you can see how big of an inspiration these kinds of titles were. And I have to say that I appreciate that.
so do I. It feels real.
Yeah, that's a really good way of putting it. It does feel real. Uh, Graphically, sound design, everything. Like Crisis Core really just is going to be this long-standing smile on my face every time it gets brought up because again, the sound design felt really good. The voice acting was mediocre. The translation was mediocre, but at the end of the day, it's a
Like that
lot
cheese
better.
is so forgivable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not Silent Hill 2 cheese. And
It's
there's
not.
your
It's
Silent
nowhere
Hill
near
content.
Resident Evil cheese. There he
Yeah.
fucking goes talking about Silent Hill again.
It's got to make an
Again.
appearance in every episode.
Again.
But I really do feel like because you recommended this game, and I want to clarify that again. This was your childhood game, so what was it that gave you this connection?
I loved hack and slash games. I was already a fan of Kingdom Hearts, and I had grown up hearing how amazing Final Fantasy VII was. It came out not long before I was born, right? So my whole life I had to play it. I had seen copies of it. My brothers had played through it. And finally, I got to the age where I was old enough to sit down and play it. And I was like, no, this is boring. This sucks. In the first 2 hours, I was like, this is garbage. I don't want to keep playing. And then I heard about Crisis Core. Believe it or not, I saw the completionist play Crisis Core. I
Oh.
think what we will, as at the time, is good to pick up information from wherever I could get it.
Hmm.
So I saw him do Crisis Core, and I was like, that looks like a way more interesting story than Final Fantasy VII. It's a, and it was so much more complex. It was so deep how they told the story. Even me, this little 12-year-old, was like, wow, that hits so hard. They're really good friends. This is a really well told. Zach is such a caring dude. There's all of this real development going on, and it's all the pacing of the whole thing. Like it's not perfect, but the way they pace the story up until the death, and they set up the beginning of Final Fantasy VII. The ending is a little rough, but the pacing up until that point really good.
So now that I've what is going on with my mic? Now that I've played through Crisis Core, are you looking forward to Intergrade?
I am. I'm looking forward to integrate a little bit. Um, Knowing that I prefer Crisis Core might make me enjoy integrate a little bit more. I didn't hate Final Fantasy 15. It's not a good game. I don't hate it, but it's not a good game. And I really want to like 7, right? So it's like the perfect balance of what I hope I liked from Final Fantasy 15 combined with everything I wanted out of a Final Fantasy 7.
Would you be surprised if I said it's nothing like 15?
I wouldn't, but I would also be a little more appreciative, like, because 15, as good as it was, had so many rough edges and was really just this Kingdom Hearts wannabe that had no place.
The only thing I think they took from Final Fantasy 15 is the fact that you fight alongside your teammates mid combat. Other than that, I don't think anything else is there.
Okay. So hearing you say that, then I'm kind of hoping it's a little bit more like Dirge of Cerberus would have been.
It's more like Kingdom Hearts 3.
I appreciate that. I can get behind that.
It's like Kingdom Hearts 3 on proud mode. Like the whole game is really hard. Like it's gonna obviously
Oh man,
we know Final
you
Fantasy a lot more. It's a hard game though.
I know you've never seen me play a Kingdom Hearts game, right? We haven't played those, but I really shit on Kingdom Hearts. There is no proud or critical for me. It's all just easy.
Well, I'm
It's
sure you'll have a good time with it then because
oh yeah.
if you obviously have the knowledge because you're recommending these Final Fantasy games that blah blah blah. Um, when I first went into Final Fantasy VII Intergrade, I didn't really know Final Fantasy that well. I haven't really played too much of it. I played a little bit of X, Zodiac. I played a little bit of 8, 6, 7. Uh,
Whereas I had played every Final Fantasy at least once,
and I never
except
cared
for
about Kingdom
7 Remake.
Hearts.
Yeah. I loved Kingdom Hearts. I hated it. There was no story. I knew that forever. But like the gameplay and the way it pans out, I loved Kingdom Hearts.
My ex's friend's boyfriend was the reason why I even played Kingdom Hearts, and I never finished it. Um, I had it as a kid, and I was just like, I don't really like Disney, and then I just never really played it because I didn't care for
Kingdom
Disney.
Hearts 1 is not a good game by today's standards. It's very dated. Like, well, we'll talk about it at a later date, but I gotta be like, Kingdom Hearts 1, not a good game. Kingdom Hearts 2, fucking excellent game. Kingdom Hearts, every Kingdom Hearts after 2 is trying very hard to be 2 up until Dream Drop Distance, where they did the Kingdom Hearts 3 shit for the first time. And then 3 was where they were finally like, okay, we know what works. We'll just do what we do and hope for the best. And it worked out real well. right? Whereas like with Final Fantasy, it's always a hit or a miss. There's never any guarantee that they're going to take anything they did before and move forward. There's this window of like real mysterious. You can't even call it good vibes because a lot of the time it's just concern. What could they possibly do to change what works into something that doesn't? Is what comes to mind when I think of playing Final Fantasy games.
I have such a hard
Final
time.
Hallway 13. Final Hallway. It was literally a hallway. All three games are you running in a straight path, running the auto attack button the entire time.
I have a lot of issues with Final Fantasy. Obviously, just beyond just the name, repetition. I like the design. I like the JRP aspects. I think they did a really good job laying the framework of how we can play a JRPG. And having something like Intergrade and Kingdom Hearts changing up that formula. In my personal opinion, I think Kingdom Hearts 3 played really well and Intergrade played really well. But now that I've played Crisis Core, I can say that those are the mechanics that I will strive to look for in the future.
I also got to be like, you've only played of the Shin Megami Tensei games, you've only played the Persona series. So you really like
Yeah.
outside of Final Fantasy, your exposure to the most popular JRPGs that were around at that time is kind of limited.
Oh, I'm not a big JRPG guy. Not even
Yeah,
close.
I am. I loved JRPGs growing up. There's something about turn-based combat that kind of sticks to me. And there was something about Final Fantasy's time-based turn-based combat that stuck with me, but then I got to playing Secret of Mana for the first time and I was like, it works better with an action RPG than it does a JRPG.
I still haven't played it. I mean, even like the Tales series, I haven't even played.
Tales is good. Tales is a JRPG and a JARPG, I think, is a good way to describe that.
Well,
Like Tales of Symphonia is an extremely unique experience.
we'll be playing those later down the line. So if anybody wants to see that kind of stuff, subscribe. Um,
Also, smack that like button and hit the bell icon to
no,
keep
don't
up
you
with
dare,
subscription
dude.
updates.
Okay, off-topic rant. I just had a couple friends, and I was putting my stream on YouTube every now and or on Facebook every now and then. I don't use my
Yeah.
Facebook all that much, and they were commenting like, "Oh man, I never get notifications," and I'm like, "Did you hit the bell icon?" And they're like, "No," because it kind of annoys me. And then I'm like, "So I have
Gotta
to
hit the bell.
physically go out of my way to message you to let you know when I'm live instead of you just literally clicking the button that will automatically notify you of when I'm live?" Like, really? Really? Like, really?
That's ridiculous.
It
Uh,
exists for a reason.
Yeah, hit the bell icon. If you subscribe to anyone that you really want to keep up with, man, hit the bell icon. Not even just us, anybody. Like, if you're a fan of the big guys, the little guys, the guy with one subscriber, 100, a million, fucking 100 million, like good old PewDiePie up there, hit the bell icon if you're trying to keep up with your favorite content creators here.
I
The
can
bell
tell you
icon matters.
exactly. I can tell you exactly who I have my bell icon clicked for. You, Eden, Scott the Waz, Markiplier, Muscrim. I think that's it.
I've got my bell icon clicked for you and Yuri of Wind because he needs more views. Go watch Yuri of Wind. He's a good content creator.
Yeah, promotions. Let's go.
Yeah.
Yaria Win, come on the podcast. Let's talk about something.
Yeah, come hang out. Come talk about video games. He does a lot of beta content and stuff.
Ooh, I've done a lot of beta content. I'm a
He's
beta tester, one might say.
yeah. He's done a shit ton of beta content. I remember first watching his shit back when I was like 12 before the bell icon even existed. And back then, YouTube actually gave you your subscriptions when you subscribed to something. Who would have thought?
That's actually a rut that I've been in because YouTube will unsubscribe people automatically now. And
If they've been inactive for too long. Yeah.
but what sucks is they don't get unsubscribed until you get more subscribers. So I've just been stuck at 320 for like 5 years.
That is so unfortunate.
It's so annoying. And I understand that like hitting the bell icon for a channel like mine is not the greatest decision because I take a lot of breaks. I do a lot of marathon content with breaks. So you'll get 4 or 5 notifications in one day where I sit down and I put in 12 hours. And
Yeah.
that might be annoying. But think about how many text messages and emails and everything that you get. Is one swipe for a YouTube notification that big of a deal?
Is it hard to just ignore it and wait for some other notification to fill its spot? There is a clear all but I don't even have a cell phone, but I know for a fact smartphones have a clear all button on your notifications.
Hmm.
You can get rid of all of that shit at once if it annoys you. The dinging bothers you. Don't let your phone get notifications from YouTube. Check that shit when you get back to your PC because right when you open YouTube, the bell icon at the top of your screen will give you a notification.
I just see these people bitching and bitching and bitching, and it's like all the tools are right there in front of you. You're just refusing to use them.
Yeah,
You don't.
they kind of changed over the years, and it's hard for not everybody's going to go out of their way to do things like that. But like, if you really care about a content creator and are trying to keep up, you got to do your part too.
Hmm.
The content creator provides the content. If you YouTube is only capable of doing so much with the protections that they've had to put in place over the years and the reasons things have changed. And like, despite what we think, despite what we know, there is so much going on there in the background that we couldn't even perceive. So
Yeah, and we're not even talking about like the algorithm and stuff like that, and how I make really long form factor content, which just is not good for the algorithm
no,
unless
yeah,
people
it's
watch
just
the whole
like
thing.
if a person to person, like if you like content creators, then why not put a little effort in if you follow them to get a bell notification? Click on their videos more often when you see them. Search them once in a while, just offhand, if you feel like it, because that helps them. That
It's
helps that helps them. That helps everyone associated with them, and you'll get to see the content that you were wanting to keep up with or looking for.
right. And we make weird content. We don't play what the standard YouTuber would play. We're not going out of our way to play hit indie titles and things like that
But
immediately.
who the fuck are we? The appease you people? No, we're
No.
content creators who make stuff for us. There's a real passion behind making something that you as a creator would also want to watch.
We played Reign of Fire.
We did. We played Rain of Fire.
Like nobody's gonna be playing Reign of Fire anytime soon.
With Four
Facts.
Swords Adventures, we still got that going on. That's an extremely interesting experience, and it's way out of character for. I mean, YouTube in general doesn't get much streaming, right? But a net play cooperative Four Swords Adventure live stream going for hours and hours. That's fairly unique. Somebody out there somewhere like that. I know I do.
Oh yeah.
Like I as if it weren't me doing it, I would go out of my way to watch that. Not only because I like Four Swords Adventures, but because the circumstance itself is just really interesting.
And it's the same thing like you were saying. You make content for yourself. I make content that's long form factor and is not always super commentary heavy because my I like video games. I don't care too much about who's playing it. So sometimes having a person playing a game I've never played before, not talking constantly is nice.
Yeah. Just getting to sit back and enjoy the experience. I've been playing Psychonauts 2. My channel's been down for a little while. I've been playing a lot of Valorant. I've been working on some other little stuff that I'll talk about later. But I've been playing a lot of Psychonauts 2 in my downtime. And I gotta tell you, that's not a game I could have enjoyed if I did it live, if I played it, or if I reviewed it. It's just a game that I had to enjoy.
It was
It's a very personal experience.
it was very difficult for me to remove the camera Zephyrian from being on Twitch because Twitch was a completely different climate for me, right? Where
Yeah.
that's what you're expected to do is be overly animated, constantly talking with your chat. And when I came back to YouTube, I was like, "Oh, I don't have to do that anymore. I get to
No, yeah, you
finally
can just
just
provide long
enjoy.
form factor gameplay.
I get to enjoy the game again. I get to really be engrossed and share that experience with people. And my video will be there for other people to watch, and they get to actually watch it with my little commentary here and there. I don't have to talk the whole fucking time.
And it's all there in the name of the platform. YouTube. You get to share your personal experiences, your content. You get to share you with the tube.
I love Indie Mouse, right? Like, I love his Super series. Love it.
Yeah,
I think it's great. I would never make a video even close to that. Not even close. Because it's not my style,
yeah.
right? It's like you doing an extremely long Let's Play, like putting up a 5.5 hour video.
That's just not me.
Yeah, I don't
I
see you
I
doing
just
that.
don't do that. I don't even have. You can go onto my channel, and if you scroll down to the created playlist, you'll find Full Metal Alchemist and the Broken Angel, the Medium, Silent Hill Downpour, all unlisted, existing only in their playlists because I don't. That's it's like clutter to me. It's not the kind of content I make, but I want it available.
Right.
You also, there's also the stuff like my Descenders stuff, my THPS stuff, my other stuff that I did over time that exists offhand like that. Like you can go back 6 years and find stuff I did from My Little Pony way back, and that is a whole different. It's I just make the things that I, as a creator, would want to watch, and that even if things feel out of character for me, I put them where they belong in character for me.
And what's interesting is with this podcast is you're experiencing new titles, you're exploring things that I'm recommending to you, and we have this dichotomy of completely different experiences. So even if you chose to do Let's Plays content, you could have one episode up that says rest in playlist, and you could have a full fucking Let's Play ready for people who enjoy that content, but you don't have to have it cluttering up your page. If you
Yeah,
chose to do that, you can, but it
yeah.
wouldn't be you. You would be making it for a niche audience, probably people who are watching my content coming over to your channel who also want long form factor content.
And at that point, that's just me paying my respect to the audience.
Right.
And that's still just as personal, right?
Yeah,
I'm
you're
never
doing
I'm
that.
never one to go looking to intentionally hit an audience, but if an audience hits me, I'll do something in return. That's just how that is.
Oh,
Because it's personal for me just as much as it would be personal for them.
I have absolutely no reason to ever break away from how I do what I want to do.
Yeah.
And I've
And
been
neither
told,
should anybody else out there. I hate to cut you off, but neither should anybody else out there. You do you. You
mhm,
make the content you like to enjoy. You be a fan of things that you like to be a fan of in the ways that you like to be a fan of them. You just be you and do you. Because it's very everyone likes to get personal, right? And dig into why you shouldn't be you. And there will always be people who will tell you negative things and shit. But ultimately, fuck them. You just do you.
yeah, like for real. Like I was gonna say, people have told me countless times, oh well, you should edit your videos more like Markiplier, or you should edit your videos more like this content creator, this content creator. And it's like, why? Why would I ever do that? I
Yeah, why
don't
would you
want
suddenly
to.
shift your style into something that it has never been?
I do my QA streams. They're 45 minutes. That's it. That's all you get. 45 minutes. And that is my style. I'm going to break down a game for you in the first 45 minutes of a game that is not available to the public and give you my full response. Like
I've
I
got ADHD. There are some games I can't play for more than an hour. A lot of the time, I'll cut out parts of games where nothing is happening. The heavy editing is something I do for my own benefit. So
right.
I have something to do while I'm editing. Something interesting that's not just a cut, a splice somewhere that and dragging the video file back into place. Something that makes me feel like I've put a little bit of effort into not just the video, but bettering myself. I learn while I do these things. I'm helping myself grow as a creator.
Final Fantasy Crisis Core Part 6 on my channel is literally just me running missions. That is it. It is just
And
me leveling.
and
That
I'm
is
sure
something you
it's a
would cut.
great time. Yeah.
That is something you would cut. You would be like, okay, I'm not going to put this into the video.
Yeah.
However, that is not my style. This is where our dichotomy comes into play. I want that to be available for people who want to watch it.
Yeah.
Because
Which
if
is funny, right? Because you're the speedrunner who goes through games as fast as you can and finds ways to exploit them.
Mhm.
And I'm the runner who goes through games looking for everything that isn't an exploit and trying to play it to its absolute mechanical
Right.
sense, and it's one of those things that's like that dichotomy is also interesting when you consider our style of content because you do this long form factor content which is the total opposite of how you play games. And I do this extremely short form factor content that's like medium ranged. And I spend so long playing a lot of the games that I play. Like a lot of these indie games that I have on my page take a lot longer than their videos. They're cut down to like 11 and 13 minutes and shit. And those were all 30, 40-minute experiences almost.
Right.
But you can see it with a game like You Will Not Remain, where it was a deep experience for me and I wanted to draw it out as much as I could. There's like one cut through the whole thing where I accidentally walked around for a little bit too long between a door transition. And that's whatever, that's my fault. But like none of the experience was lost. It was a beginning to end long form factor thing for me because it was just made to be that way. And I respected that, but not only that, I respected that I wouldn't have watched it and enjoyed editing it if I had cut out all of the things that made it feel special.
And
Like if
that's
I
how
had cut
I
out all
feel.
of that empty space mattered in that one.
That's how I feel. Like when I'm discussing something like this on the podcast, I don't want to cut anything out because if I cut stuff out, I might cut something out that I want to talk about later, and I might not know I want to talk about it when I'm editing. So having everything available for somebody to go through and watch it like a walkthrough, look at exactly how I played with nothing out of place.
Yeah.
I even if it is a speed run, if I play, I don't know, Max Payne, a game that I can speed run pretty well, I'm still going to show you literally everything, even though in my personal off-screen playthrough, I might skip all the cutscenes. Obviously, I'm not going to skip
We
all the
did
cutscenes.
we did Halo Combat Evolved and you were more than willing to sit and stop with me for a second while I kept shooting at the glowy pillar thing.
I mean, obviously, I got to get you back on track and be like, hey, listen, you can come back to this later because I don't want that dead air. But
But like
that's just how it is.
even if it is dead air, there's still something in the moment worth having,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's what makes your stream so important. There's never something in the moment not worth having, and that's why you do your content the way you do.
Absolutely.
Whereas like there are so many times where I personally feel like I wasted time, and that was my fault.
And that's how you want to produce your content. If you feel like
Yeah,
something does not need to belong there, by all means cut it out. It's almost like we're different people producing different content for a different audience.
you you use all kinds of hyperbole in your naming structure. You title things certain things and uh, give it a kind of writer's twist how you name everything. And I am very formulaic. The name of the game, what part it is, what series it's a part of, and it always is that same thing.
But I've stopped being hyperbolous. I've started just being like,
Eh,
this is Final Fantasy Crisis Core, this is the end. This is part 6, this is part 5. And that is
but you still got like missions for leveling, right?
yeah,
Small little keywords inserted here and there that give a good descriptor of what it is and what's going on.
right. Because I feel like that kind of information is important for the viewer to recognize what's happening within that episode, whether or not
Yeah.
it's worth skipping, or if they want to jump into it and skip around and see what they want to see, then they
And,
have every right to.
and that there is the key difference between your content and mine. Where your content is this very technical, very informative content almost all the time, where you show off a great many things. I like to be an entertainer. I
Hmm.
don't like to fill up my time explaining things. Exposition is not why you come for entertainment. I like to crack a joke. I like to cut a thing out. I like to change how a thing looks. I like to point out a thing. And a lot of it is based solely on the fact that I like to entertain. I
Right.
I would I like to entertain myself. I yell at my I started doing let's plays when I was a kid because I didn't have friends, and yelling at myself was a good way to go. It felt nice.
Yeah, if that works, absolutely. And yeah, I guess socializing and things like that. I mean, that's a huge part of it. Like talking to yourself or just getting words out there to the ether does help me with my daily life. I'm autistic.
And
I
then
have a hard time socializing. So
yeah,
sometimes just communicating to a
it,
screen helps.
yeah, having something to talk to that isn't judging you.
Well, they will later, but not now.
They will later, but not in the moment. The camera itself is not judging you.
Right,
You're not judging you when you're talking to yourself.
right. I get to be
Maybe you are.
myself. I get to be myself, and that makes me happy.
Yeah, freedom in the video camera.
Freedom in the video. and putting on a show, like playing a character or playing it up because the camera's on, or doing something with the microphone, or doing little voices here and there. That if that's your thing, go for it. It's not mine.
Yeah. Not everybody is PewDiePie.
Or
Just throwing that out
Markiplier.
there. Yeah, just throwing that out there. They have their personalities that work for them. They are good content creators because their personalities belonged to them.
Hmm.
They created their personalities. They are their personalities. You really can't be somebody you're not.
Yeah, like you're a very comical person, but you're also very serious. So you
Yeah.
combine those things and you use hyperbole in very intelligent ways that could be used in passive aggressive comedy and things like that. That all
And a
works
lot of the
extremely
time,
well.
yeah, and a lot of the time it can fly over a lot of people's heads. It's not made for everybody.
Where I'm much more of an educational lecturer style, my comedy style is a little bit more dry, but I have fun with it in my own way. I like to ramble on for a long period of time on very specific topics because when I'm making my content, especially when it comes to like mechanical design, it's something that's very important to me because that's what I do.
Yeah. When I talk about horror, it gets I get into it. I get involved. I feel tension on purpose. I get to feeling the environment. I immerse myself because that's what I do. It's horror. Yes.
It's one of the reasons why the Last of Us episode is so important to this podcast.
Yeah.
You really came through and you said a lot of your thoughts there. I mean, if people want to understand you, that is a good example of an episode that they can go watch to get more read.
Because it's one of those times where I got to be totally honest. I wasn't just shitting on something for the sake of it. It wasn't something that I had great positive thoughts about. It was something that I had a serious opinion on for a moment.
Hmm.
Where I was like, okay, this is why I feel like this. The Last of Us is because I feel like this, and that's really just the broken eggshells that you're walking on around it.
Right.
They're gonna get stuck to your feet, and they might hurt a little bit, but I'm not gonna clean them up.
It's the same thing with the Silent Hill joke. It's the same thing towards me. It's dry comedy.
Yeah.
You know me enough as a person that when you say, "Oh, there he goes talking about Silent Hill again," you're not bothering me. I
Yeah,
think it's funny because it is an important game to me that I'm going to reflect on and reference constantly. It's my
and
favorite
despite as
game.
much as I give it shit, it's important to me too. It's important to our friendship.
Right. Silent Hill 3 is very important to the conversations that we've had to become closer friends through our opinions. It's one of
Yeah.
the reasons why this podcast exists is because of Silent Hill 3. The arguments that we had led to us becoming more open to each other's opinions and the discussion on why we feel the way we do.
How the hell about that, huh?
Right.
You can have an open discussion and share your opinions and still disagree and have a civil discussion with your friends about the things you disagree about and leave the conversation like, yeah, I understand your point of view. This is my point of view. It's good that we have each our own points of view.
Like even after we walk away from this episode where we talk about Final Fantasy Crisis Core and YouTube and things like that, we recognize that my experience with Final Fantasy Crisis Core will never be yours.
Yeah.
Yours will always be yours. Mine will always be different. I am
Yeah.
28 years old. 11 years ago, or no, it wouldn't be 11 years ago. It's years ago, in 2007, I never played this game. You did. I am
I
28 years old, playing this in
yeah.
2022.
You walked into it as an adult for the first time with a fresh adult's perspective, and that first experience means a lot to you from that perspective, from your personal perspective in that perspective.
Hmm.
Whereas like I was a kid, whether or not I went back as an adult and liked it now, I would always have that piece of me that was rose tinted for it as a kid.
I could have walked
It's
into this
just
conversation and been like, Final Fantasy Crisis Core is absolute dog shit. And you want to know
yeah,
what? You would have been like, okay, tell me why you
yeah.
feel that way.
Yeah, because a healthy discussion is bred from understanding why somebody has the opinion they have. You
Right,
don't just go, "No, you're fucking wrong. It's good, and this is why it's good, and that's why you're wrong." You go, "Tell me more about that."
right. When we started up or not Final Fantasy, Four Swords Adventures, you were initially hesitant on that experience because you weren't sure if you were going to enjoy it because you're not the biggest Zelda fan.
And I wasn't even sure if I was going to have a decent experience because it's all net play.
Right.
That was a huge one.
And
And
you're
we wound up having a
loving it.
great experience. Yeah. It's awesome. It's my favorite Zelda game.
Which, when that podcast drops, I have a feeling you're going to have way more to say than I will.
It's going to be a very rare moment for me. It's good. I have some things to say that I've never said about a game.
I'm excited for that personally. Well, do you have any closing thoughts on Final Fantasy Crisis Core, just so we can wrap this up in a nice little bow? And
We
Eric
need
is here.
more. We need more of this. It doesn't even have to be Final Fantasy VII again, right? Crisis Core itself was a great concept and a great idea. If you've never played it, go do. It's very do. You might not like it, but you also might, right? You'll never know unless you try it.
Right. And
And
that's me.
yeah,
That was me. I
you
went
walked
into
into it
Crisis
just
Core. And I was
totally
like,
blind.
I'm not gonna enjoy this. I'm not the biggest fan of Final Fantasy. I haven't enjoyed a lot of Final Fantasy games, and then I walked away from
Me.
it, and it's my second favorite Final Fantasy game.
Me, the person who's like, no, Final Fantasy as a whole series just is bad, loves it, is one of my favorite games, despite not liking the series it's a part of.
This whole thing has put a whole conundrum into how I view video games, and I love that about it.
It's a thunker, for sure.
Go play it.
Go play it.
Go
It's
play
a
it.
lot of fun. That is the key takeaway from this. You'll never not have fun doing it.
And you can play it on your phone. It is just simplified enough where a cell phone will play this game just fine. It
Yeah,
will.
I would
Oof.
argue like this would be a mobile port of the game or a remaster that made its way to mobile would be a great idea. Square, get on that.
Right. I mean, they're doing Final Fantasy VII remaster on mobile. Just saying, where's our Crisis Core remaster on mobile?
Yeah. And none of that Final Fantasy 15 mobile shit. Like a real Crisis Core on mobile, please.
Final Fantasy 15 on mobile. Oh my god. We're gonna
It
have to
was
cover
so
that one
bad.
day. Which I've heard some people who don't have consoles did enjoy it, and I have to say to them, that's fine. If you've enjoyed it on mobile, that's fine.
But maybe try getting a console and playing the real game and then go back to it and recollect your thoughts a little.
Steam
Like
Deck
you
is
just, you
$400.
know, yeah, get a fresh perspective and go back to it. Be willing to get a fresh perspective and go back to it because your thoughts might change. They might stay the same. You might like it even more. That's you never really know. The exploration is a lot of fun.
Just real quick, I'm going to tell people what you told me in the past because I feel like it's important to state right now, right here. Um, Go buy a cheap graphics card, slap it in a whatever computer, and experience a video game. If you need to emulate something on your cell phone, there are tools available for you to do that. If you can get your hands on old Game Boys, none of these old consoles are bad. There are plenty of amazing experiences across all of the spectrums. If you can't afford something super nice, there is no shame
It
in playing something
doesn't
old.
take much to emulate a console. It really doesn't. It
No.
doesn't take much power. You can get a 650 Ti and emulate everything up to the PlayStation 2 and through there really well with a basic ass dual core or quad core CPU. It doesn't have to be perfect. Get an old Optiplex and maybe an RX 560 or 460 and just go ham. Go ham with some emulators. Play it. Get a cheap laptop with dedicated graphics if you can find one, an old one, something with Windows 7 at the very least, and go ham with emulators there. If you've
Right.
just never experienced it, it's worth experiencing.
And
You
it
get to try so many things that you would have never seen before.
and that might be the thing that tips you over into buying something like a PC or a PlayStation 4 or an Xbox
You
One.
could play every console ever from anything, and emulators are constantly getting better.
Right.
PCSX2 is done.
Right.
I mean, what more can you say about it? It is done. It is almost completed. It is practically perfect.
And this is mainly for people who are watching this who like video games. Like, there are a billion and one ways to get people who don't play video games to finally experience a video game. And there are so many video games now available that are so simplified. And and I'm sorry if you
And
disagree
it
with any of
really
these titles, but Beyond Two Souls, Man of Medan, you have all of these story-driven games, Wolf Among Us, that you can play and get people interested and encapsulated into the gaming
and
space using.
shout outs to the difficulty options.
Mm-hmm.
Because depending on what your tastes are, you can be any age with any number of problems. And because you can set a game to easy or normal or hard in most instances, you would be able to enjoy that experience. I imagine a lot of old timers, maybe 50 and above, who had Doom in their 30s on old PCs were like, Doom 2016 is awesome. There's an easy mode, so my reflexes can take a break. I can just kick back and enjoy some new Doom, and this kicks ass.
Right. I was just watching a podcast recently, and one of the guests that they had on was a gamer. And they were like, "Oh, is anybody playing Elden Ring?" And everybody in the office was like, "No, nobody here really plays video games." And he was like, "Oh, you should play it. It's a great first game." And I have to agree because it provides you with this massive uphill challenge, but when you achieve it, it's so visceral down to your core, the dopamine hit. Like that success, like you put the controller down, you're sweating and you're just like, "Oh my god, I did it." And
Yeah,
they just had another podcast out and he was like, "If any of you can beat the first main boss, I will pay for your game and give you $100." Every single person in that crew did it with evidence.
that's awesome. So that's a good initiative to get them started gaming. And you know what? Every single one of them is going to look back at that experience and be like, that wasn't just fun for the money. That was fun because that was a good game.
Yeah.
Some of them might, there are a couple in there that might be like, I don't want to go back to it. It was whatever. But I guarantee the majority, the big portion of them will be like, that was a good game. I'll go back to that. It makes me want to try other games and see what's out there.
Right. And that's like the whole and this goes on to my TikTok conversations that I've been having and blah blah blah. But even you were like, I don't really want to play Elden Ring. And then you saw me playing it and you were like, I kind of want to play Elden Ring.
Yeah, I kind of want to play Elden Ring. It looks good.
It's very
I've
good.
heard great things.
It's very fun. It was co-written by the guy who did Game of Thrones.
Uh, George R. R. Martin.
Right.
Yeah, I got that right.
Not the
He's,
not the
I didn't,
Scientology guy.
I've never seen Game of Thrones. I don't like Game of Thrones. I don't give a shit about it's medieval sex violence, the show, the book.
I'd rather play it.
Yeah. Go play Telltale's Game of Thrones. I heard good
Ooh.
things about that.
Just go play video games.
Just go play video games. Just go enjoy yourself. Dude, not even video games. Just go enjoy yourself. Just go be you. And just, you do you, fam.
Bam. The takeaway from this episode, what do you think it is?
Not every series is terrible all the time, but not everything you want out of something might be there also. Like, if you're not a fan of something, don't be afraid to give one part of it the benefit of a doubt because you might enjoy that part of that thing. But also, there will be things about it that you likely won't enjoy also, and if you're willing to look past that, you'll have a way better experience.
I think that was very well said. I would have to agree and add sometimes it takes more than one attempt to really find something you enjoy, and with Crisis Core is a good example. This is a game that in the beginning, I remember picking up and putting down, and now that I've played it again, I feel bad that I missed out on it, and I'm happy that I played it again because now I get to walk away with an incredible story, and I look forward to the future of the franchise.
Yeah. It added an entirely new, fresh perspective. That should be the takeaway. The takeaway today is go looking for a fresh perspective.
Right, because we talked about even the YouTube thing, and that was all about taking a fresh perspective.
Yeah. Go find a fresh perspective. It's a good lesson.
Or hit subscribe.
Yeah, and the bell icon. Don't forget to do that.
And go check out Red over on his channel at Red Barrel for the win. What do you have in the works, sir?
I still have to finish the Cooking Man. There are some secretive stuff dues in the work dues. I'm still working on Lightless. I gotta show you some of the stuff I've done for that.
Very nice.
Yeah, I gotta change the name of it too. Think of something a little more creative.
And what is the game we will be playing next?